Welcome to another edition of BASTA TV from the BASTA 2015 in Mainz. With me is Paul Stack. He's with the company Dream It, Get It, and he's infrastructure engineer. And Paul, you just gave a keynote here and you said something about yourself. You said you're a reformed .NET developer and a DevOps extremist.
Yeah.
And yeah, what do you understand under these terms?
So when I class myself as a reformed .NET developer, it's more the case of I have become much more happy using multiple languages to solve multiple problems. So whether it be Python or Go or Java or, you know, still a little bit of C# or PowerShell, I'm happy using any of those languages, rather than before I would have classed myself as a C# developer and would only have used C#. And like a DevOps extremist is that I totally live and breathe in my work everything to do with the understanding of DevOps and the understanding of empathy and the understanding of teams working together in order to build better software for our company, which is, that to me is much more important than the actual creation of the software itself.
Okay, yeah, build better software. It's not only the building of the software you were talking about, it's about the getting the work done, yeah, bringing software into production. Why is that so important?
So, software itself, we have this myth of the definition of done. And usually in development teams, the definition of done is when it's released. Okay. For me, the definition of done is when the software is actually deprecated, when it's no longer in use and it's not running on my servers anymore. But when software goes to production, that's only a very small part of the process. The rest of the process happens while it's in production, because you can have security concerns that you have to think about. The system has to be tested under load. Users find bugs that we just don't even realize is there, because that's just how they interact with the software. So getting the software to production, getting it ready for production is only a very small part of life. And where I've traditionally in my career, up until the past 5 years or so, is I only used to focus on that. Now I'm actually focused on what's happening in production, what's happening, given the metrics, given the feedback, helping developers make choices based on response times and whether there's bugs and whether there's, you know, high CPU because of a feature that they've released. And that's actually very interesting. Metrics itself, which is not something we ever really collected as developers, can give you an extremely complex level of information about how your system is actually performing.
Okay, you're talking about the system when it's running, and you're talking about developers. So usually that's what you're saying in a kind of over-exaggerating. Developers give something in production, then they lean back and said, my work is done. And now you say, no, not your work is not done, it has just started. What is the second most important aspect, except that it should run and work without failures, that is important for you? It seems to me the value of a software. And for me, it was really intriguing to hear that someone is talking about the value of a software, not in terms of that it is working at all, but that it is doing something for the company. So
we develop software for a reason. Okay, we believe that we have to fulfill a problem. Okay, and that problem is whether the users that want that software is internal users of the company or external users. As software professionals, we should be always striving to understand what they want. Okay, because what I think and what you think a piece of software has to do is going to be 9 out of 10 times different to how a user believes that it's going to work. So by understanding the value of the software that you're creating, and more importantly, gaining metrics as to whether it's being used in the way that you believe it is, you can actually continue to fine-tune that software to make it as good as it can possibly be. So there's no point in believing that a feature is going to work, releasing that feature to production, and then forgetting about it, you know, because somebody has to maintain that. And if it's 6 months' time or a year's time where somebody comes back and says, we need to change that piece of software, you're like, is it even being used? You know, or do we still have that piece of software, I've heard in some companies? And that's what it is. It's about collecting those metrics to understand that you're servicing your users in the best possible way that you can. And it's very, very important, and a lot of people forget about this, that internal users are just as important as external users. Yeah. Because you don't want to make life very difficult for staff in your company if they have to use one of your pieces of software. You want it to be as easy and as simple to use as the external users would feel, because otherwise you're adding extra strain to their life and their jobs.
One way to achieve this is, in your opinion, that the teams have to work together or build teams at all. Yeah, so that dev and ops and maybe the marketing or financial services should work together to produce a piece of software. Is this really a new concept, or is this a concept which is somehow blocked in the minds of people?
I think
in different roads, not only the developers.
I believe that this is a problem that traditional enterprise companies haven't been able to solve because they have organizational structures and hierarchies which say, you know, the operations team reports to this person and the developers report to this person, and then only those managers would talk to each other because that's how an organization and a hierarchy works. But when you start to introduce some good organizational chaos of where there's not those strict lines of reporting, but that developers are actually allowed to interact freely with the operations team, then you get a real good understanding of how it's working. So let me give you an example. I'm a developer and I've just released a piece of software, and you're the operations guy who is actually watching it, how it performs in production. Wouldn't it be fantastic if you as an operations guy would be able to go and say, hey Paul, that piece of software you released last week, that has increased the RAM consumption of our servers by 50%. We're now going to need to scale up. So if you can, have a think about that and think about the areas of your code that are churning very high the next time you're actually working on that piece of code. You're giving them the feedback in order to make the software better earlier in the process.
Okay. That sounds to me that these organizational chaos is controlled. You can't have an organization without controlling. It's controlled by communication.
Yes. It has to be communication. We need to remember in IT organizations that we are one organization. We're not 5 organizations within an umbrella.
Yeah.
We are actually, if we're working on a product or 4 products as a company, that's all teams in the company need to work in order to make those products the best possible products. Yeah. Nobody wants to go and work in a company that doesn't produce the best. So it's all about making ourselves higher performing through communication. And it's very easy for me to say communication, you know, be better at communication. In IT, we're extroverts. Or excuse me, we're introverts. And we don't like communicating with people. It's not natural for us. We're not performers.
But you have to. But let's come to the tooling side, because you are a reformed .NET developer. But is it possible for .NET developers? I mean, you now use all kinds of technologies. People who are in the .NET world and Windows world, are they able to do that? So
since PowerShell 2, which is like Windows Server 2008 onwards, anything in Windows can be automated. Let me rephrase that. Not anything in Windows. All the major pieces of the puzzle can be automated. So you can automate the installation of IIS. You can install automate the installation of security patches. You can do user management. You can do package installations. It can all be managed. The trouble is that a lot of the people who are still working in a traditional environment have created what we call as snowflakes. So there's no real sense of everything being the same on your production servers, because those servers have probably been in production for 4 years and have been added to and tweaked and added to and tweaked manually. And because of that no 2 servers will be the same. So by bringing up new servers, the next time you bring up the new server, if you automate, then you know everything is going to be better. You can practice destroying it. You can practice bringing it back up. So it's a mindset change. That's all it is. And it can be done. It doesn't matter what platform you work on. You can automate something. And that's what it has to start with. It just has to start with something very small.
Okay, that's a great insight. Thank you very much. And I think if you feel the problem, that it is a problem to communicate, just talk about technology with your dev and your ops team, and maybe then it works.
I would agree.